Not every problem in life needs a solution. Yet many people spend hours, sometimes days, trying to solve situations that don't even exist. A conversation, a text message, a small mistake, a future event. The mind grabs it, replays it, analyzes it, and refuses to let it go. And the strange part? Most overthinkers are not weak people. In fact, many of them are intelligent, thoughtful, and highly aware. But somewhere along the way, their ability to think became an inability to stop thinking. And that's exactly what we're exploring today. Hello, my amazing students, and welcome again to your channel. My name is Clara, and in this episode, we're going to uncover why people overthink, what overthinking does to the brain, why it quietly destroys confidence, and how learning to think differently can completely change your life. Most people believe overthinking happens because they care too much, but that's only part of the story. The deeper reason is much more interesting, because overthinking is not really about thinking. It's about uncertainty. The human brain hates uncertainty. It hates not knowing. It hates unanswered questions. It hates unfinished stories. And whenever something feels uncertain, the brain immediately starts searching for answers. The problem is, sometimes there are no answers available. At least, not yet. Yet the brain keeps searching anyway. Now imagine someone sends you a message. A simple message. You reply. Hours pass. No response. And suddenly, your mind gets to work. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they're upset. Maybe they didn't like what I said. Maybe I sounded strange. Maybe I should send another message. Maybe I shouldn't. And before you know it, a situation that lasted 5 seconds creates 30 minutes of mental noise. Sound familiar? What's interesting is that the event itself wasn't the problem. The uncertainty was. Because uncertainty creates tension, and the brain wants relief. So it starts generating possibilities, then more possibilities, then more possibilities. And eventually, thinking becomes overthinking. Now here's something fascinating. Overthinking often feels productive. That's why it's so difficult to stop. When people are overthinking, they usually believe they're solving something. They believe they're preparing, protecting themselves, preventing mistakes, finding the perfect answer. But in reality, many times they're simply running in circles. The mind keeps moving without actually moving forward, and that's exhausting. Now let's go deeper. Overthinkers are often intelligent people. That's what makes this topic interesting. The same brain that helps someone analyze situations, solve problems, and notice details can also become trapped inside endless mental loops, because intelligence creates possibilities, lots of possibilities, and every possibility becomes another road the mind wants to explore. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if I choose the wrong option? What if people judge me? What if I fail? What if I succeed? The mind jumps from branch to branch like a monkey moving through a forest, never staying still long enough to rest. Now, here's something many people don't realize. Overthinking is often connected to control. Deep down, many overthinkers believe, if I think about this long enough, I'll find certainty. But life doesn't work that way. Some decisions require action. Some situations require patience. Some questions require time. And no amount of thinking can replace those things. That's why overthinking becomes frustrating. The brain is trying to solve problems that can only be solved by experience. Now, imagine someone standing at the edge of a swimming pool. Instead of jumping in, they spend 3 hours analyzing the water. The temperature, the depth, the risks, the possibilities. Meanwhile, someone else jumps in after 30 seconds and learns everything through experience. That's often the difference between thinkers and overthinkers. One thinks enough to act. The other thinks so much that action never arrives. Now, let's talk about English learning for a moment. This happens all the time. Some learners spend months asking, should I learn grammar first? Should I focus on listening? Should I shadow native speakers? Should I learn vocabulary? Should I watch movies? Should I use podcasts? And while they're analyzing the perfect method, another learner is simply practicing, making mistakes, improving, moving forward. Because progress often comes from action, not analysis. Now, here's the ironic part. Overthinking usually starts with good intentions. People want to avoid mistakes. They want to make smart decisions. They want better outcomes. But eventually, the thinking becomes so excessive that it creates the very thing they were trying to avoid: stress, fear, confusion, self-doubt. And that's when overthinking becomes a trap. Not because thinking is bad. Thinking is valuable. Thinking helps us grow. Thinking helps us learn. The problem begins when thinking replaces living, when analyzing replaces acting, when preparation replaces experience. And that's where many people get stuck, because life keeps moving while they're still trying to figure everything out. And perhaps that's the biggest lesson of all. Some answers appear through thought, but many of life's most important answers only appear through action. There's something strange about confidence. Most people think confidence comes first, then action follows. But in reality, it's usually the opposite. Action comes first, confidence follows. And this is exactly why overthinking becomes so dangerous. Because overthinking delays action. And when action is delayed, confidence never gets a chance to grow. Now think about a child learning how to ride a bicycle. Imagine if that child spent 6 months analyzing balance, watching videos about bicycles, reading books about cycling, studying the physics of movement. Would they become confident? Of course not. Because confidence doesn't come from understanding, it comes from experience. Eventually, they have to get on the bicycle, fall, try again, adjust, improve, and slowly, confidence appears. Not before action, after action. Now here's where many overthinkers get trapped. They believe they need confidence before they begin. They tell themselves, I'll speak English when I feel more confident. I'll apply when I feel more confident. I'll start when I feel more ready. I'll try when I'm less afraid. But that day rarely arrives, because confidence is not something you wait for. It's something you build, and you build it through action. Now let's talk about English learners. This happens every single day. A learner knows enough English to speak, maybe not perfectly, maybe not fluently, but enough. Yet they stay silent. Why? Because they're waiting to feel ready. They're waiting for confidence. Meanwhile, another learner with the same level starts speaking, makes mistakes, gets embarrassed sometimes, learns, improves, and 6 months later, the second learner sounds much more confident. Not because they were naturally confident, because they acted despite uncertainty. And uncertainty is the key word here, because overthinking and confidence have a strange relationship. The more you overthink, the more reasons you find to doubt yourself. Your brain starts creating problems. What if I make a mistake? What if people laugh? What if I fail? What if I look stupid? What if this doesn't work? The mind becomes an expert at identifying risks. But here's the problem. It rarely spends equal time identifying possibilities. Now imagine two people standing before the same opportunity. The first person asks, "What could go wrong?" The second person asks, "What could go right?" Both questions matter, but overthinkers often become trapped inside the first one. And after enough time, fear starts feeling like reality, even when nothing bad has happened. Now here's something fascinating. Your brain cannot build evidence from imagination. It builds evidence from experience. That's important, because many overthinkers spend years imagining failure. Meanwhile, confident people collect real-world evidence. They try, they learn, they adjust, and their confidence grows because reality keeps teaching them lessons. Now let's go deeper. Overthinking often creates an illusion of safety. It feels responsible. It feels intelligent. It feels productive. But many times, it's simply fear wearing a clever disguise. Because thinking about something feels safer than doing it. Planning feels safer than acting. Analyzing feels safer than risking. Yet growth rarely happens inside safety. Growth happens when you move despite uncertainty. Now imagine someone learning English. Every day they tell themselves, "I need one more course. I need more vocabulary. I need better grammar. I need more preparation." And while they're preparing, life keeps moving. Opportunities keep appearing. Conversations keep happening. Experiences keep passing by. Because preparation has value, but endless preparation becomes procrastination. And that's where many overthinkers lose years, not because they lacked ability, because they delayed action. Now, here's a truth that changed many people's lives. You don't become confident by eliminating fear. You become confident by proving to yourself that fear cannot stop you. That's a completely different mindset, because fear is normal. Uncertainty is normal. Doubt is normal. Every successful person experiences them. The difference is what happens next. Some people stop. Others move anyway. And every time they move anyway, their confidence grows a little more. Now imagine yourself a year from now. You acted despite uncertainty. You spoke despite mistakes. You tried despite fear. You learned through experience instead of endless analysis. Would you still feel the same? Probably not, because action changes identity. The moment you start acting differently, you begin seeing yourself differently too. And that's where confidence is born. Not inside perfect thinking, not inside endless preparation, but inside repeated action, small action, imperfect action, consistent action. Because in the end, confidence is not the reward for feeling ready. Confidence is the reward for showing up before you're ready. Here's something that surprises many people. Overthinking is not always a sign of weakness. In fact, sometimes it's a sign of intelligence. And that's what makes it so confusing, because many overthinkers are thoughtful people, curious people, observant people, people who notice details that others miss, people who see patterns, people who think deeply. The problem isn't that they think. The problem is that they can't stop. Now imagine two people looking at the same situation. One person sees 3 possibilities. The other sees 30. Who is more likely to overthink? Usually the second person, because every possibility creates another question, another concern, another scenario, another mental road to explore. And before long, the brain becomes crowded. Now here's something fascinating. Intelligent people often have powerful imaginations. That sounds like an advantage, and many times it is. Imagination helps people create, invent, solve problems, see opportunities. But imagination has a shadow side too, because the same mind that can imagine success can also imagine failure. The same mind that can imagine opportunity can imagine disaster. And when imagination is combined with fear, overthinking appears. Now let's go deeper. Most overthinkers don't suffer because reality is difficult. They suffer because their imagination creates hundreds of versions of reality. The brain starts running simulations. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if people react this way? What if everything goes wrong? And the strange thing is, the brain treats many of those imagined situations as if they're real. Your heart rate increases, your stress increases, your energy decreases, all because of events that haven't happened. Maybe events that will never happen. Now think about how exhausting that is. It's like carrying a backpack filled with problems, except most of the problems are imaginary. Now here's another reason smart people overthink. They often believe there must be a perfect answer, a perfect decision, a perfect strategy, a perfect moment. And because they're intelligent, they can keep searching for it forever. The mind says, maybe there's a better option. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I should wait a little longer. And sometimes that's useful, but often it becomes a trap because life rarely offers perfect certainty. Now let's connect this to English learning. A highly analytical learner might spend weeks researching the perfect learning method, watching videos, reading articles, comparing strategies, building schedules, optimizing everything. Meanwhile, someone else simply starts practicing. And after 6 months, the second learner has more experience. Not because they were smarter, because they spent more time doing and less time analyzing. That's one of the great paradoxes of growth. Intelligence can help you move faster, but excessive analysis can slow you down. Now here's something important. The goal is not to stop thinking. That's impossible, and honestly, it's unnecessary. Thinking is valuable. Reflection is valuable. Planning is valuable. The goal is to know when thinking stops being useful, because every tool becomes dangerous when used too much. Even a good tool. Water is useful. Too much water becomes harmful. Exercise is useful. Too much exercise becomes harmful. Thinking is useful. Too much thinking becomes overthinking. The difference is balance. Now imagine a successful pilot. Before takeoff, they use a checklist. They think carefully, they prepare, they analyze. But eventually, they have to leave the ground. Imagine if the pilot spent 6 months reviewing the checklist and never flew the plane. That wouldn't be intelligence. That would be paralysis. And many overthinkers accidentally do the same thing with life. They keep preparing, keep analyzing, keep waiting, but they never leave the runway. Now here's a powerful realization. Some of the smartest people in the world make decisions with incomplete information. Why? Because they understand something important. Clarity often comes after action, not before it. You learn by moving. You learn by trying. You learn by experiencing reality. And reality is usually much kinder than the scary stories we create in our heads. Now imagine yourself 1 year from now. You still think deeply. You still analyze important decisions. You still use your intelligence. But you've stopped demanding perfect certainty before taking action. You've stopped trying to solve every possible future problem. You've stopped carrying imaginary disasters everywhere you go. Instead, you trust yourself a little more. You act a little sooner. You worry a little less. And suddenly, life feels lighter. Not because you became less intelligent, because you learned how to use your intelligence without becoming trapped by it. And that's one of the most valuable skills a person can develop. One of the strangest things about overthinking is this. It often creates problems before problems exist. And once you notice this, You start seeing it everywhere. Now think about what happens when someone receives an opportunity. Maybe it's a new job, a new relationship, a new project, a chance to travel, a chance to speak English with someone. The event itself is usually simple, but then the mind arrives, and suddenly the simple situation becomes complicated. Not because reality changed, because imagination got involved. Now here's what overthinking does. It takes a future possibility and treats it like a present reality. Maybe I'll fail. Maybe they'll reject me. Maybe I'll embarrass myself. Maybe I'll make a mistake. Maybe everything will go wrong. And before anything has actually happened, the brain is already suffering. That's why overthinking feels so exhausting. You're fighting battles that don't exist yet. Now imagine someone who has to give a presentation next week. The presentation is 7 days away, yet every day they replay it in their mind. What if I forget my words? What if people judge me? What if I look nervous? What if I fail? By the time presentation day arrives, they've already lived through the experience 50 times. Most of those experiences were imaginary, and that's the tragedy of overthinking. It steals energy from the present to solve a future that may never arrive. Now here's something interesting. The brain evolved to detect danger. Thousands of years ago, this helped humans survive. If our ancestors ignored threats, they didn't last very long. So the brain became very good at asking, what could go wrong? The problem is, modern life contains far fewer life-threatening dangers, yet the brain still runs the same software. It scans, predicts, analyzes, searches for threats. Except now the threats are often social, emotional, psychological, and many of them never happen. Now let's connect this to English learning. A learner wants to speak, but before speaking, their mind starts creating stories. What if my pronunciation is bad? What if I forget words? What if they don't understand me? What if I sound stupid? And suddenly, a simple conversation becomes a terrifying event. The person isn't reacting to reality anymore. They're reacting to a prediction. And predictions are often wrong. Now here's a powerful truth. Most of the things people worry about never happen. And even when they do happen, they're usually far less dramatic than imagined. Think about your own life. How many things kept you awake at night 5 years ago? How many of those worries actually changed your life? Probably very few. Yet at the time, they felt enormous. That's because overthinking magnifies uncertainty. It takes a small possibility and turns it into a giant mental movie. Now let's go deeper. Overthinking often disguises itself as responsibility. People tell themselves, I'm just being careful. I'm preparing. I'm thinking ahead. And sometimes that's true, but there's a difference between preparation and obsession. Preparation helps you act. Obsession prevents action. Preparation creates clarity. Obsession creates confusion. Preparation lasts a few minutes. Obsession lasts for hours. Knowing the difference changes everything. Now imagine standing at a crossroads. One path says, take action and learn from reality. The other path says, stay here and keep analyzing. Most overthinkers choose the second path, not because they enjoy suffering, because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. Yet, here's the irony. The longer you avoid uncertainty, the bigger it becomes. The longer you avoid action, the scarier action feels, and the cycle continues. Now here's something successful people eventually learn. You cannot think your way out of every fear. Some fears disappear only after experience. You speak. Then you realize it wasn't so bad. You apply. Then you realize rejection wasn't the end of the world. You try. Then you realize mistakes are survivable. Experience teaches lessons that thinking never can. Now imagine yourself 1 year from now. Instead of spending hours fighting imaginary scenarios, you spend more time engaging with reality. You stop asking, "What if everything goes wrong?" and start asking, "What if everything is okay?" You stop treating every uncertainty like a danger. You stop trying to control every future outcome. You trust yourself a little more, and little by little, life becomes quieter. Not because problems disappeared, because you stopped creating extra ones. And that's one of the greatest freedoms a person can discover. The ability to live in reality, instead of living inside endless possibilities that may never happen. For a long time, many people believe the goal is to stop overthinking, to silence the mind, to eliminate doubt, to never feel uncertainty again. But honestly, that's probably not going to happen. Because you're human, and humans think. Humans worry. Humans imagine. Humans question things. The goal is not to become someone who never overthinks. The goal is to become someone who trusts themselves enough not to believe every thought. And that's a very different skill. Now think about this. Most overthinkers have a strange relationship with their thoughts. Every thought feels important. Every possibility feels urgent. Every concern feels like it requires immediate attention. The brain says something, and they instantly treat it as truth. But here's something powerful to remember. A thought is not a fact. It's just a thought. And those two things are very different. Now imagine you're sitting beside a road. Cars pass by constantly. Some are beautiful, some are noisy, some are fast, some are slow. You can watch them pass without getting into every car. Thoughts work the same way. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every thought deserves your belief. Not every thought deserves your energy. Yet overthinkers often jump into every passing thought and follow it for miles. That's exhausting. Now here's something fascinating. The people who seem calm are not necessarily people with fewer thoughts. They're often people who have learned not to fight every thought. They've learned to let some thoughts come and go, without turning them into stories, without turning them into fears, without turning them into problems. And that creates peace. Now let's connect this to confidence again, because confidence is often misunderstood. Many people think confident people feel certain all the time. They don't. Confident people experience uncertainty too. The difference is that they trust themselves to handle whatever happens next. And that's why trust is so important. When you trust yourself, you don't need endless certainty. You don't need guarantees. You don't need perfect answers. Because deep down, you believe, if something goes wrong, I'll figure it out. And that belief is incredibly powerful. Now think about learning English. The most successful learners are not the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who trust themselves enough to keep speaking despite mistakes. They trust themselves enough to sound imperfect, to feel uncomfortable, to learn publicly. And because of that trust, they improve. Meanwhile, the overthinker keeps waiting for certainty, waiting for perfection, waiting for confidence, waiting for the perfect moment. And often, that moment never arrives. Now here's one of the most important lessons in life. Action creates information. Thinking only creates theories. You can think about swimming forever. Eventually, you have to enter the water. You can think about speaking English forever. Eventually, you have to open your mouth. You can think about changing your life forever. Eventually, you have to take the first step. Reality teaches faster than imagination ever will. Now let's go deeper. Many people are carrying invisible pressure. pressure to make the perfect decision, the perfect choice, the perfect move. But life rarely works that way. Most successful people didn't have perfect clarity. They had enough clarity to begin. Then they adjusted as they moved forward. And that's how growth actually happens, not through certainty, through adaptation. Now imagine yourself 5 years from now. You still think carefully. You still reflect. You still analyze important decisions. But you've stopped demanding absolute certainty before taking action. You've stopped treating every thought like an emergency. You've stopped trying to predict every possible future outcome. Instead, you trust yourself. You trust your ability to learn, to adapt, to recover, to grow. And because of that trust, life becomes lighter. The noise becomes quieter. The fear becomes smaller. The opportunities become larger. Now here's the deeper truth. The opposite of overthinking is not carelessness. The opposite of overthinking is trust. Trusting that you can handle uncertainty. Trusting that mistakes won't destroy you. Trusting that you don't need all the answers today. And trusting that action will teach you things that thinking never can. So the next time your mind starts creating endless scenarios, pause for a moment, take a breath, and ask yourself a simple question. Do I need more thinking right now, or do I need more action? Because sometimes the answer you've been searching for isn't hidden inside another hour of analysis. Sometimes it's waiting on the other side of a single step forward. And that step might change everything.